3, 2, 1. Liftoff.
Welcome to the Ketamine Startup Podcast. This is where we talk about how to start a ketamine clinic, how to market it, and more. And in this episode, Sam hosts Scarlett Mulligan, a physician assistant and innovative founder of Novus Behavioral Health in Clarksville, Tennessee. During this conversation, Scarlett shares her background, which includes service in the Air Force and her journey from emergency rooms to pioneering comprehensive psychiatric care, which includes ketamine infusion therapy. Let's jump into the episode.
Welcome to the Ketamine Startup Podcast. Thank you for joining us. This is your host, Sam Coe, and I have the privilege and honor of interviewing Scarlett Mulligan for the podcast today. So welcome, Scarlett. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here.
And for the listeners who may not be familiar with you, tell us, who are you, and give us some background information.
I am a psychiatric physician assistant. I reside in Clarksville, Tennessee. Prior to becoming a PA, I graduated PA school at the University of Washington School of Medicine in 2005. Prior to that, I was in the Air Force from 1998 to 2003.
Wonderful. And I know you've had various careers. You were in the Air Force as an EMT, did the University of Washington. Tell us, before you started up your own practice, Novus Behavioral Health, tell us where you were at, maybe, let's say, a year before the actual launch of the clinic.
So a year before I launched Novus Behavioral Health, I was working in the emergency room down in Nashville. And so I've worked in a variety of settings. I've worked in primary care, urgent care, orthopedic, emergency medicine, back to primary care, long-term care. And throughout all of that, I consistently felt the most connection with patients. Those are my people. And so in the emergency room, I saw a lot of delayed access to psychiatry, a lot of patients who could have avoided hospitalization, who could have avoided arrest, who could have avoided suicide attempt and suicide success. So, and you've been in emergency medicine, and it's heartbreaking. And it just got to the point where I knew that I've had other businesses in my life, and I wanted another business, and healthcare felt very intimidating to me. And there was some fear associated with going out on my own. I liked the illusion of the security that a W-2 paycheck brought me, but it is an illusion. The ones I really started wrapping my mind around, honestly, they could cut me at any time and I would be out of a paycheck, right? And then the other thing that kind of came to mind was, if they're willing to pay me this much to work for them, why am I not willing to pay me that much to work for me? And so these were some shifts in my mindset, but my discomfort of seeing these patients suffer, knowing that I could participate in the solution, that discomfort became greater than my fear of launching. And I knew that my 80-year-old self would rather have the regret of failure than the regret of never trying.
Yeah, that is so beautiful. And I really like this concept of the illusion of the W-2, because you're absolutely right. When we have that employee model, it's, you could get fired anytime, or at least in the emergency medicine world, if that corporate group or whatever group you're working for loses the contract with that ER or the hospital, then it's okay, now what do I do? And so in a way, it truly is an illusion. Although it does feel comfortable getting that regular monthly, biweekly paycheck. I think it was Nassim Taleb who said, heroin and a monthly paycheck are the two most addictive substances in the world.
Absolutely.
And I'm curious, you had mentioned that there's a certain part of you that really resonates with the psychiatric world and patients who may be challenged with some of these various conditions. What is it about that specific group that kind of resonates with you and just aligns with you?
I come from a long line of intergenerational trauma. I grew up in an alcoholic home. with a mother who is quite restless. We relocated to over 13 different states before I graduated high school. Yeah. I did my first drug, we'll leave that unnamed, with my stepfather. So I lived in a home that was very unstable, very chaotic, high conflict. And as I got older, so my mother passed away. We were in a car accident when I was 20. And it had primarily been just she and I our whole life. And I set out to change my life. I was not going to perpetuate that cycle of trauma. And so I joined the Air Force. And a lot of people, their experience in the military is traumatic. Mine was not. Mine was probably the most stability I'd ever experienced. There was structure, there was consistency, there was routine, there was expectations, there was accountability, all these things that I had never really experienced. And so I craved that. I don't know that I was conscious that I was craving that. So those 5 years really developed me. And I was a late bloomer. I didn't go in until I was 24, I think. So from 20 to 24, I was just really all over the place. But then I joined the Air Force. I got straightened out. I began counseling. That's where my healing journey began. I met my first PA. I was an EMT and a medical assistant. And I was like, oh, do you think I could do that? And they were like, yeah, we were all med techs before we went to PA school. And so they had me doing all of their charting, all of the procedures they didn't want to be doing. They had me suturing. They had me doing vasectomies, pap smears. They had me doing all sorts. And I was looking back on it so grateful. So when I went to apply for PA school, I had already had just a wealth of clinical experience. And so, yeah, that's the short version of how I got into and then finding my way to psychiatry, I think, was just my own personal growth journey and wanting to work more intimately with patients than what we were doing in the family practice setting or the urgent care setting. I wanted to be more involved in people's mental health.
Oh, that's beautiful. And thank you for your vulnerability and sharing that
Yeah.
personal background and story that really resonates with me. It's interesting. They did the Kaiser study looking at adverse childhood experiences, the
Yeah.
ACEs study, and they found
Mhm.
that children who are impacted by adverse, challenging childhood experiences, that'll create manifestations long term, even if they're adult, and not just psychological issues, but diabetes and cholesterol and coronary
Oh,
disease
yeah.
and hypertension.
Yeah.
So that
Mhm.
mind body connection, it's
Mhm.
very powerful, much more than we realize. It's also really cool how you were working on yourself and healing yourself. And there's this archetype that Carl Jung talks about. I think it's called the wounded healer archetype, where it's, yeah, I had my own issues and I was able to work through some of them. And now maybe I can bring that information or the wisdom or insights and share with others. So I hear that
Mhm.
in your story as well.
Yeah. That is, I get that feedback from my patients. I don't utilize self-disclosure a lot. I'm judicious and discerning in my use of self-disclosure, but my patients know that I get them and they get me. And I allow some level of intimacy there that maybe people who haven't done their work, who are maybe still in the wounded phase rather than the healed phase. And I think all of us as providers go through that at some point. We're really in it for our own sort of what I went through this noble narcissism phase, right? I'm going to save everyone. Because I've done it. I've healed. I've overcome. And then eventually maturing into a place of humility and recognizing the honor that is present in patients. It's more difficult to go, I think, in to see someone for your mental health than it is to have go in for a physical exam, like a pap smear or something like that. I think that patients truly see it as much more difficult to open up and be vulnerable with their heart and their minds and what's going on there.
Yeah, it's so true because if someone has a fever and cough, it's like they're more than ready to go to. But it's interesting how with mental health, a lot of people are not willing to share or ask for help. And I don't know whether it's because it's like an invisible disease or whether there's just a mental health stigma within our communities and societies. But I do notice that it does require definitely a big level of vulnerability because in a way, sometimes our patients are sharing their innermost secrets with us. And it is an honor and privilege to be a witness to that and support them. But it does take a lot of courage for those patients.
Yes. It takes time to develop the trust and rapport for them to get to that place.
You had mentioned, to shift gears, you had mentioned that you've had a couple of other businesses, which I didn't know about before you started up
Yeah.
Novus. Tell us a few that pop out that were
Yeah.
interesting
So
for you.
when my grandmother passed away, and I was 21 at the time and still reeling from the loss of my mother and just disoriented in the world, I inherited a lot of rental property that was free and clear.
Wow.
And it was an enormous amount of, not enormous, but for a 21-year-old who was raised by an alcoholic mom, not a good scenario. So luckily, within a couple of years, my grandfather recognized that I was really rapidly declining because my behaviors were not consistent with sustainable living. And so that sort of is what led me to go into the Air Force eventually. I was like, I cannot continue to bartend. This is awful. But I did enjoy bartending. It was a different kind of being, a different kind of a healer, I think. Then in 2008, I opened up my ex-husband had a 7th generation family farm. And we had an agritourism enterprise. There was a pumpkin patch and corn maze and zip lines and hay rides and summer camps and Easter egg hunts and petting zoo and field trips. And that was probably the happiest years of my life. That business brought me a lot of joy. Psychiatry and medicine also bring me joy. But people would walk in black and white, just one-dimensional. And they were mad, had to pay admission. And they would leave in living color. Like you would just see the transition, the transformation that happens when families have these shared experiences. And it filled me spiritually in a lot of ways to be able to offer that to the community. And it was quite successful. I held some positions within some national organizations that promoted agritourism.
Wow, that sounds like a great business.
Yeah, I really want it again.
In a way, it reminds me, I noticed themes of that probably in your existing practice with the ketamine, where they may come in black and white, and then they're able to have an experience of this non-ordinary state of consciousness, and then they come out in full color. Although it may not be like in a group setting with the agricultural tourism, but in a way it is, they are having a profound experience.
They are. And rather than that being the external connection, they're really, I feel like, more deeply internally connected. What I call a shift in their alignment. It's almost like an emotional or mental or spiritual, in some ways, adjustment going to the chiropractor, because they really come out much more connected with the ability to be more reflective, less reactive, responding from a place of self. And it's wonderful to see that snowball happen because they have more positive experiences with themselves, with the world, with their employers, with their loved ones, with their friends, with their community. And then they see themselves more positively. And the more you see yourself more positively, the more positive experiences you have. And the same is true for the mental health decline. Also snowballs when you're experiencing guilt, shame, remorse, regret for reactivity, emotional reactivity, and that snowballs it also. So it's really an enjoyable experience to watch from beginning on.
And it's so true because that spiral can be a positive upward spiral, but also, like you said, it can be a negative downward spiral. It does go both ways. And it can just feed upon each other, leading to a positive cycle or a vicious cycle in either direction. I'd love to hear more about Novus Behavioral Health. Tell me all about your clinic and about your practice, because I know ketamine is one of many things you.
So Clarksville is a town of about 175,000, and we did not have very many psychiatric providers here. We had just a few, And they were almost always, it took a long time to get in with them. And so when I knew that's what I wanted to do, I started with low overhead and I moved into a 10 by 10 little office in a multi-suite building. And it was just me trying to figure out credentialing. It was a disaster. And so I hired a credentialing company. I hired another credentialing company. I think that credentialing experience set me back by about $12K. Yeah, that was probably the worst part of starting the practice. That was about 9 months. And during that time, I was 1 foot in the ER. I was picking up some shifts at a friend of mine's urgent care. I was doing psychiatry. I was wearing all these hats, answering my own phone call, just all the things, figuring out which EHR is going to work best for me. How am I going to get through insurance? What are Google reviews? Oh, all the things. And so that's how that started. And that was April of 2018. And then 2019, I was able to afford to move into a little bit of a bigger space. I would say the way that I acquired most of those patients is I took a video of myself and I posted it on my website and I said, hey, I'm Scarlett. I want to take care of you. This is how I want to take care of you. And once I did that, it didn't matter if I took insurance or not. They just wanted connection. They wanted someone who was going to show up and be present and attuned to their needs. I moved into this bigger space. And then, of course, COVID happened. I wasn't sure what was going to happen. I was terrified. But what happened was I got more patients because everyone became miserable during COVID. And it grew and grew. And it got to a point where I was working 6 days a week, sometimes 10, 12-hour days. And I thought, there's no point in this kind of success. This doesn't make any sense to me. I'm miserable. Yeah, I have great cash flow, but I'm exhausted. I'm tired. And you know where I went? I went to get ketamine.
Ooh, tell us more if you don't mind sharing about that.
So it was November of 2020. I was going through COVID. Had just recently become a single parent, was not expected. And I had all of these patients. I felt like they were all depending on me. I didn't have any other providers that were credentialed. I didn't even know how to hire another provider. I guess I knew how to do it, but it just didn't, I'm like this accidental entrepreneur, like many of us are. I was just going to go into private practice. And I was in a really negative space. I didn't feel like I had the time to wait for another antidepressant to work, or I didn't have the capacity to transition from one antidepressant to another. I thought that may be enough to just, I don't know. One of my patients actually told me that he went to get ketamine and I had seen just a dramatic improvement with that. And I went to Nashville. I got ketamine. And by January of 2021, I hired 2 clinicians.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So something about it helped you overcome that block, or what do you think? What was the change?
The fear was present, but the fear was not gripping. But being in the position that I was in, just personally and professionally, I had a distorted perspective on life in general. It was just not it was a dark night of the soul, to be sure. And so I hired these 2 clinicians and they filled up, both of them, within 6 months. And then I started learning more about leadership skills and culture and what do employees need and what do employees want. So I hired more support staff. And so I started with no patients in April of 2018. And this past month, we saw 1,200.
Wow. 1,200 patients. Patients or visits, or
1,200 encounters.
1,200 encounters. That's incredible. And how many, because I know you have, you're obviously, maybe you're working clinically, or is it mainly your staff?
1 day a week. I'm working 1 day a week clinically. I have a servant leadership style. And so my philosophy was, I know how to take good care of patients. If I can transition that to taking care of a business and taking care of staff, creating an environment of psychological safety, security, reliability, consistency, routine, structure, all the things that I learned in the Air Force, then I work really hard to retain my clinicians. And if I retain my clinicians, we will retain patients, and patients will receive the care that they need. And that's through the continuity of care and relationships that evolve and develop. And so that's how I run this practice.
That is amazing, Scarlett. I know even for me personally, like I have a staff, I have nurses, medical assistants, but in a way, to hire another clinician, whether it's a PA or NP or MD, or I think there is a leap to take. And maybe it's like letting go of control or giving the next person autonomy. What do you think helped you make that shift? In addition to ketamine therapies, you had mentioned,
Yeah.
yeah, there was the fear, but
It's
not as grip.
mentorship. It's absolutely mentorship. The family practice that I worked in back in 2000, I worked there for several years. I was owned by a physician who actually took care of my grandparents when I was younger. Like I can remember seeing him as a little girl. And so there was a little bit of a paternalistic type relationship with him, but he was a great mentor. He still is a great mentor. I don't mean to refer to him in the past tense. I still talk to him on a weekly basis. And I have another mentor who is a physician. She's a psychiatrist. She is my collaborating physician. So she helps me very much clinically. And then Dr. Bowles, he's a family practitioner. He helps me very much with leadership and business decisions. Of course, fractional CFO helps quite a bit in that too. I think it's really about surrounding myself with wisdom, because just because I know how to drive a car does not mean I need to be working on a transmission. So I own a car, I can drive the car, but I don't need to know how to change out tires, right? So I think it's important to delegate and to seek out the wisdom and the experience. I don't need to recreate any wheels. I don't have anything to prove. I'm just here to receive whatever I can get to help run this operation to the best of my ability.
Wow. Kudos to you, Scarlett. That is so
Thank you.
amazing. I'm curious to hear more about the ketamine side of it. So what have you
Yeah,
noticed?
okay.
Because I know you had opened up Novus, but you were not doing the ketamine and then
I was not.
incorporated it later.
No, it
Tell us
was.
about that.
So the old C1 do one teach one, I didn't really have that. And I wasn't really in a position financially to go out and pay for these, you go for a week or whatever and learn how to do ketamine. And so I took the ketamine startup course and I took a few other courses. And I was talking to Dr. Bowles and I was like, I don't know, I'm thinking about taking this fourth course. And he said, the thing is, more knowledge does not cure imposter syndrome. Experience cures imposter syndrome. You don't need another course, Scarlett. You just need to do it. And so I started with IM because I just wasn't sure. And my greatest anxiety, and nobody else, maybe, I don't know if anyone else has this anxiety, I did not want to gatekeep something that was expensive. I did not want to be the one to make the decision around, I'm sorry, you can't afford this. And so a great deal of trepidation around that, because insurance, I work with commercial payers and Medicare and TRICARE. I do not take Medicaid, but that was something that was a limiting experience. And so I just started out with patients that I had been seeing at that time. Let's see, it was 2022. So by that time, I had been seeing some of these patients 3 or 4 years. But they were okay. They were doing okay. Optimal treatment plan, right? But they were by no means where they were well, right? We were just managing symptoms with medication. And this one fades, and then you have to switch over to this one, and then you have to switch it, and then you have to augment with this one, and you have to wait. Is it going to work? And oh my goodness, now you have side effects. Now you have weight gain. Now you have sexual dysfunction. Now you're non-compliant because now you don't want to gain weight. It was just, management is its own experience, but ketamine offered something different. And so I took 10 patients that I felt like, and I said, listen, this is new to me. Here's what I would like to do. I need for you to sign this paperwork. I need for you to know that this is new to me. And I was just very open with them. Like, here, I've taken all these courses, and so we went ahead, we moved forward. And one of the patients, it's just such a moving experience. At the end of 6 visits, she just looked at me and she said, "Please do not hold back. We need you. We need this." And that was what I needed to hear in order to move forward in integrity, I think. And there have been patients who haven't been able to afford it. And you know what? I've made arrangements. We make it happen. We can do that for everyone, but I do it where I can. And worked out the med mal, got my RN, got a psychiatric mental health nurse practitioner who it's her ketamine clinic and the RN's ketamine clinic. And right now we're doing Monday, Wednesday, and Fridays. And it's very soon that I'm going to have to expand to Tuesdays and Thursdays. Because it's just, I actually started marketing for the first time last month. Up until now, I've just been allowing it to grow quietly and organically because I never ever want to overpromise and underdeliver. When I grew the farm, I grew that at an exponential rate to where the supports were not there. So I want to make sure that we are where we need to be in order to support all of our patients and all of our providers and all of our support staff, and very committed to not, like I said, overpromising and underdelivering. We also offer TMS, which, I was a little bit of a skeptic. I was like, yeah, well, no, okay. But wow, I'm impressed. TMS, really, I'm so impressed. And Spravato too. Spravato is a good option for patients who are unable to afford ketamine, or insurance will cover this Spravato. And we're doing the medication management. We haven't branched out to anything else, but when something else comes around, I will certainly be involved there. Sure. I don't want any patients in Clarksville having to drive to Nashville. It's an hour drive. And I had patients going to Nashville for TMS. 37 treatments. They were driving an hour over here, 20 minutes of
that's
treatment,
right.
hour back, 5 days a week for 7 weeks. And I thought, I'm going to get a TMS machine. I can't be letting me drive up there. Well, not very pleasant. So, yeah.
Wow. I mean, I don't even know if you need to add any more, Scarlett.
I don't know. I really like the idea.
Yeah, I've heard good things about
Neurofeedback
that.
and therapists. I'm venturing into the possibility of hiring some therapists because I really would like to offer ketamine-assisted psychotherapy.
Yeah. You got the ketamine infusions, you got the Spravato, you got the TMS, you got the med management possible, neurofeedback. And what I love about hearing about all the options, I don't know, if someone's going to build a house, like you're going to need to hire more than one person. Like, hey, we need a plumber, we need an electrician, we need someone who's good with drywall, we need someone who can paint. And the fact that you're able to offer these different services, I think it's a real tremendous impact for your community. And to hear about this story about someone driving 1 hour each way back and forth, that's 2 hours times it by 36, 37 days. That's a lot of time, and time is precious for the patients. So yeah, that's wonderful.
If you tuned in to our episode today, chances are you're curious about the ins and outs of starting up a ketamine clinic. It's an exciting field, but let's face it, the journey from idea to actually opening day can be quite daunting. That's why we've created something special for you. Think of it as your personal roadmap, a free downloadable checklist that lays out the essential steps you need to consider when starting up your ketamine clinic. This checklist is designed to help you avoid common pitfalls and launch your trajectory to success. So how can you get your hands on this checklist? Simple. Just visit www.ketaminestartup.com/checklist and grab your free copy today. We've made it easy and accessible because we believe in supporting our community with a valuable resource. ketaminestartup.com/checklist. All right, let's get back to our discussion. Stay tuned and don't forget to download your free checklist during or after the podcast.
What do you think specifically for adding ketamine? What do you think was there a big challenge for you, or was it pretty easy and smooth? Was there any challenges for incorporating it to your existing practice?
No significant challenges. The only significant challenge probably throughout this whole journey is my own confidence, my own belief, and my own fear. I would say that is probably the greatest challenge is me. But outside of that, I research a lot. I read a lot. I try to analyze things from every possible which way. Maybe some people would call it overthinking. I call it due diligence. I don't know that there's been any significant challenge in incorporating the ketamine. Perhaps the scheduling, getting the scheduling. We serve the VA population, and they have certain requirements that we have to meet for them. And so managing the chairs, because we have 6 chairs. And so my RN is just amazing at making sure that there's no more, if chair 1 and 3 are in their first 40 minutes, she has that timetable all navigated out so that everyone is monitored appropriately and receiving the attention that they need. 6 chairs, that's overkill, but we also are running Spravato. So there's people who are also going through that as well. I would
Yeah, I
love
mean,
insurance to pick up and pay for it.
yeah, and I know Massachusetts Blue Cross Blue Shield does cover IV ketamine or Spravato. So I've heard of one insurance company covering it.
Nice.
And at our clinic, we do the super bills, and some patients will submit that to their insurance company and get partial reimbursement, sometimes 0%, sometimes 50%, 75%. It's pretty variable. But it is cool how you've gone through that whole credentialing process. You're able to accept insurance for the other services like TMS is covered, Spravato is
Yes.
covered,
Yeah.
medication management. Is that an easy process to do? For example, one of the questions I get asked frequently is regarding Spravato, like what's that process like? Was it smooth? Was it challenging? Was it just a lot of paperwork?
Systems. I believe in systems. And if you're going to do it one time, then you may as well just go ahead and write a whole process sheet for it. If it's something that is
Like a
going to come up
protocol.
more than once, then
Mhm.
let's just go ahead and invest the time up front, step it out, and systemize it. Where are we seeing repetitious behavior? And where can we get proactive and get in front of it, these obstacles? So I feel if you invest your time appropriately up front with documentation, with Spravato, as far as like facing different insurers and trying to get them to cover it, and you just document as you go, oh, this is the first time that I've handled a Blue Cross Blue Shield Texas. Okay. So they want you to go through medical benefit. They don't want you to go through pharmacy benefit. And so you just document that out each and every time you come across something new, and then you're prepared. And that's part of what led me into practice ownership is I had worked for many environments that managed reactively. And I like to be in as much proactive and active management as I can possibly be rather than reactive management. You want to spend as little time in reactive management as possible. And so I really try to coach that along in my staff. Okay, we've done this once or twice. We're probably going to do it 10 more times. So let's go ahead and systemize it. And so and the REM certification was not challenging. The only thing that's challenging maybe is like supporting documentation, making sure that your providers put in there tried and failed this many antidepressants. And some of these insurances are getting really aggressive in that they want printout from the pharmacy where they filled that SSRI from 5, 6, 7 years ago, or they want documentation from the provider. And this has only happened one time. And I thought how aggressive they're being during these prior authorizations. But we're rolling with it. We're going to do what we
Wow.
can to get them through.
And it sounds like that concept of systematizing it, developing a protocol process. Like you said, we've done it once, we've done it twice. We're probably going to do this 10 more times. So might as well
Yes.
figure out like being proactive. That's really insightful. And as a matter of fact, if I were ever to be an employee, I'd want to work with you or work for you, Scarlett, because it
Well,
sounds
thanks.
you think ahead and you take care of your staff. And in turn, we know that if we take care of the staff, they're going to take care of the patients,
Absolutely. If they're going to
right?
do what naturally comes to them, they're already coming with the desire to take care of patients. You just have to support them. And then they will
Yeah,
naturally do what they want, what they are here to do, what they feel like their purpose is, what their calling is. And so that's what I feel like my job is. Yeah.
that's awesome. So let's say someone is listening to this podcast or watching it and they're, let's say they're working in the ER or at an urgent care or in the hospital setting, and they're an employee, but then they're also still considering, hey, maybe I should open up my own practice, whether that's with ketamine or with TMS or whatever it is, just opening up your own thing. What one piece of advice would you give to that individual?
One. I have to give one.
You can give two.
Okay. I'm going to say start with the smallest amount of overhead, because that is going to relieve a lot of pressure off of you. The last thing you want, it's hard enough to open up a practice, I feel like, or go out on your own, to go from the security or the illusion of security with a W-2 and transition into employment. There's pressure that develops around that, and you do not want additional pressure of a large overhead. So that's number one. Number two, community, mentorship. Surround yourself with people who are going to really lift you up and give you the attaboys and the attagirls that you need. I remember just Dr. Bowles and Dr. Wise were just so crucial in helping me develop my vision and my actions. And so I would say that low overhead and plenty of support, as much support as you can get.
Totally. It takes a village to raise a child. It also takes a village to start a business. And actually, I think I met Dr. Bose in Denver.
Yeah, you did.
A few years ago. Yeah. He's a really, super friendly. I know I only chatted with him briefly, but just one of the nicest guys ever. So humble and down to earth.
Yes,
I was
very
And so if he's listening to this, which maybe he is, shout out to Dr. Bose. Next, we're going to shift gears into some fun questions. And these are like rapid fire questions, but you can take your time in responding. The first question I have for you, Scarlett, is regarding a deserted island. If you could only have one book, one movie, and one type of food with you on the deserted island, what would those be?
The one.
The one.
The one.
You get two to go into theme.
Oh my goodness. So I'm alone on a deserted island. Yeah. And so I'm one who is very relational in nature. I rely a lot on connection and community. So I'm probably going to need to have Viktor Frankl with me, Man's Search for Meaning, because to me, that's going to be its own, being alone like that is probably going to be its own prison for me. And movie?
Yeah, one movie.
Movie. Okay, so it's not Gone with the Wind, because I watched that enough growing up. I'd have to say Shawshank Redemption. That's it's a classic. I love Morgan Freeman. And then the food on a deserted island.
One genre of food.
Okay. This is pretend, so we're going to go with sushi, because that's my favorite.
Okay, good to know. Sushi is a great choice. And by the way, I love Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning. I've read that multiple times, both Kindle version, hard copy, and even the Audible version. And Shawshank Redemption is one of my favorite
Really?
ever.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. And especially the part when he makes it through the pipe and through the feces and all that toilet water, he's just standing outside in the rain. Like, I can feel that catharsis of being free, even just talking about it. It seems like you got a lot on your plate. So let's say after a long day at the clinic, whether it's seeing patients or being that servant leader for your clinicians, what's your go-to way to like relax and just chill out?
Oh, if I'm being honest, it's probably Netflix. Netflix and my dog. My dog right in my lap, and I'm just like, I do spend a lot of time at the softball field with my daughter, so that's always a good time. But when you're with patients all day and you're spending all that time talking and pouring out, it's sometimes just nice to just shut down. So, yeah.
Totally. Do you have a hidden talent or hobby that most people would be surprised to learn about?
Yes. Yes, I've gotten this question before. And actually, that's the other thing I would recommend to people is that they can get in an entrepreneurship peer-to-peer group. I'm in two. I'm in entrepreneur organization and another one for females called Brand Trust. And that was also one of the questions when I was going through that process. But that's been very helpful in developing my vision and creating strategy. Working with other entrepreneurs who are seasoned, it's great. It's like a little entrepreneur incubator. So I ride a motorcycle.
What?
most
What kind of
people,
motorcycle? What kind of motorcycle? That surprised me. What is it, like a Vespa or is it like a real, is it Harley? What is it?
I looked at a Best Buy. I really did. And my son, he's 22, and he's absolutely not. You cannot do that. And I was like, but they're so cute. No, it's actually a Can-Am Spider. It's a trike. It's got the two in the front and the one in the back. I just love that thing. I just get on it and I feel free. It's just wonderful.
That sounds amazing. I used to
Yeah.
have, it was not a Vespa. It was a bigger than a Vespa. It was like, I think it was a pretty big bike, but it was a scooter because I didn't want to deal with shifting gears and all of that.
Yeah.
But it was so much fun. But then once I had our daughter and she's now 4, I'm like, I haven't had the chance to ride it as much. So I ended up selling it. But I do agree with you. Something about being on that bike
Oh,
and
it's
cruising
just
down,
so
it's
fun.
just so
Yeah.
freeing. It's exhilarating. I got the helmet on. I can yell. I can scream. I mean, it's a blast.
It really is.
So thank
Great
you for
times.
sharing that.
Yeah.
This one is not on one that I had sent you earlier, but I'm going to ask you anyways. So let's say, as a hypothetical, that you cannot be in the healthcare field for whatever reason.
Oh,
So
yeah.
you can't do that, but you have to have
Yeah.
some sort of career. What would you do instead?
I would, oh man. Yeah, I think I would run like a bed and breakfast in Mexico. Not an Airbnb, but like a genuine like bed and breakfast where people are staying there. Yeah. And I'm there in some capacity. But yeah. Something
Nice,
in
nice.
tourism. I love tourism. Yeah.
And is there a reason specifically for Mexico? Do you like,
It's
I don't
close
know,
enough for
Cancun?
my kids to regularly visit without spending too much money flying them out there. And I love the scuba diving in Cozumel.
Ah,
Like the
beautiful,
best scuba diving in Cozumel.
beautiful. Here's another question that is impromptu, but let's say in the past 1 year, what have you purchased for, let's say, $100 or less that's made a significant impact in your life?
Eating out. I love to eat out.
Sushi?
I can't really think of anything. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm hearing like a good meal at I'm assuming sushi restaurant,
Yeah.
but
Sushi. Yeah. Or hibachi. Yeah.
or hibachi.
Mm.
Nice. I think those are all the questions I have. And is there anything else you want to share with the listeners any other insights or ideas, anything else that we haven't covered that you'd want to share with our audience, Scarlett?
That if it is in somebody's heart to go out there and do it, I can't say it's been easy, but I can say that it's been worth it. It's not necessarily anymore for me. It's not necessarily about the outcome. It's changed because when I first started, it was, oh, I want to have this much money. I want to make this much freedom, have this much time. And it's transitioned now to, how has this developed me as a human? Who have I become through this? And I've become resilient, more resilient than I was. I have learned how to use my voice effectively. I've become more courageous. I like who I'm becoming throughout this journey, even though it's tough and it's difficult and there's challenges and obstacles. All of that stuff is true for a W-2 job. There's challenges, there's obstacles, there's heartache, there's difficulty, right? You're doing it for yourself instead of doing it for your employer. Don't tell my clinician that.
If there's
No.
anyone, again, that I want to work for, it'd be you.
No, I would support them. If they ever wanted to go out on their own, I would support them. We would just want to make sure that we worked it out and we had a conversation.
Yeah. It sounds like you'd make a great mentor given your
Thanks.
experience with mentors. So if people want to learn more about you, your clinic, what's the best way? Is it your website? Is it socials?
Yes, probably just our website. We have a lot of video on the website. It's www.novus, which is NOVUSBH.com, novusbh.com. And I'm on LinkedIn.
I love it. We will definitely put the links in the show notes for people
Thank
to
you.
check out for Scarlett's website and LinkedIn. And it's been a pleasure having you, Scarlett, on the podcast. Love what you're doing. I love what you shared with us a moment ago about the adversity that it takes and that will occur when we start the business, but who you become at the end of the day, that's really resonated with me. So thank you for sharing
Yeah.
that. And thank you for being here.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. I appreciate being here.